So with regards to final projects and authentication, we noticed a lot of people struggling with authentication, like for the people's personal projects. There are ways around to do authentication, like getting a token and all that. So I wouldn't focus on authentication and having that be a blocker that prevents you from moving forward in your personal or in your group project. I know a lot of people are on each team, so I'm sure people are able to troubleshoot authentication, but there's an easy way around it. If you just don't use the built-in Django user model, and you just build another separate user model and have like username, password, and that's pretty much it. And you can just authenticate users by just querying the database to see if that user exists and then storing it in local storage or something like that. So don't focus on authentication if it's a major hurdle for your group project. Does anybody have any questions about authentication and that?
The one thing I was actually concerned about was more or less hiding the API keys. I know there's like a .nav or .env, is the main kind of method.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you still technically see the API key go across in your messages or something, the HTTP, the actual calls. So
I would say that's a valid concern, but it's a very minimal concern. So you shouldn't even worry about the API keys or hiding them. If your project success is going to be dependent on whether or not you can hide your API keys, just show your API keys because then your project's going to actually work. But it's not that big of a deal. No one's going to be looking for your API keys, and especially if they're free, it's not that significant. But I know people posting in the chat, it's just there's a few ways to do it, whether it's through JavaScript or Python is an environmental variable, but these are going to be hosted on Heroku, and there's a whole nother way of how to store environmental variables.
Yeah, I did see that on Heroku. So that's where I wasn't sure whether I should even, cause I think they still said you should technically hide it in your environment, and then when you post it up, then it'll ask you to enter those keys at that other server.
Right. I would say focus on that at the very end of your project. Once you have like the app up and running and everything is working, and then when you push to Heroku or whatever, then you can go back and add the keys appropriately. But that shouldn't be a priority. For example, a couple of cohorts ago, I think I've mentioned this a few times, is that one final project to do authentication, they created a basic user model, not connected to the Django user model. And when someone typed in their username and password, it literally grabbed every single user in the entire database and looped through it, looking for where that username matches that password, and then just said, okay, the user exists. All right, route them to another page. So, and their app looked fine. It looked great. It demoed great. No one was the wiser, but that's something you can go back and refactor. It beats being stuck and not having anything to show. All right. So for your group projects, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can everyone see my screen? Yep, awesome. So I created 4 GitHub repositories. 2 for I called the garden harvest one, where it's like what to plant in my garden. I just called it garden harvest. So I've got a garden harvest backend and a garden harvest front end. If you click into those, you probably have received an email. So it's an empty repository. I added each individual that they initially have write access to this repository. Likewise with the front end, it's an empty repository. Everyone on the team currently has write access. So what one person on the team needs to do is create a Django project for their backend and then git init it and then run through this and push their Django project to this GitHub repository so your team members can clone it down and have it on their local machine. Does anybody have any questions about how to do that? So you're not cloning anything down. You're initializing a new Django project, and then you're running through essentially this. Push an existing repository from the command line.
I'll do it for the classroom group.
Perfect. And then, so that's for the back end. And for the front end, you do the same thing, except for the front end, you don't do a Django project. You npx create React app, garden harvest. And then you push an existing, git init it, git add, git commit, and then you can do git add remote origin master and just run through these two or yeah, I guess it's this one, but yeah, initialize a new React front end and then push it up here so your teammates can have a front end. Does anybody have any questions about that? So you're going to be working on in these two GitHub repositories for your group project. Likewise with the classroom collaborator, same thing. Everyone has access right now, write access for the GitHub front end and back end. So Michael, you said you're going to be doing it for the Garden Harvest back end.
Yep.
Do you want to do it for the front end too?
Oh, sorry, computer, classroom. But yeah, I'll do the front end.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, classroom and front end.
I'll init both of them. That's fine.
Yeah, it's very similar to pushing the Heroku as far as just resetting your head or your remote. So,
Yeah. But yeah, you can literally just do this as well, except skipping this add readme. So who wants to do it for the garden harvest?
I'll take care of it. I'll get both of them up.
Okay, cool. So here's the thing. Once you do that, I'm going to take off write access to the master branch. So this is all about manage. So no one on your team can directly push to the master branch. We want to get in the habit of creating branches for the features and then make pull requests and then have one of your team members having to review your pull requests and then be able to merge it in. Does anybody have any questions about how that process is going to work? So, Michael and Julian are going to push a Django project and React front end to their repositories. I'm going to remove writing on master branch. So whenever someone pulls the most recent code down to their local machine, they have to create a branch and make changes on that branch and then push that branch up to their repository and then make a pull request into master. So GitHub, I just kind of want to show you what that looks like. So this is last cohorts, branches. So it has a branch protection rule. No one can directly merge into master. So yeah, so no one of your teammates can push all their code directly to master and mess everything up. It's about controls. Does anybody have any questions about the workflow of branches right now? You'll get plenty of practice in the next few days. All right. So let's talk about tomorrow. So before the end of the day, I want everyone in their group to reconvene with one another. I think I have, so you can reconvene or talk via Slack. How many people are in each team? Is there 6? Let me see something real quick. Okay, so I'd recommend using Slack and the video calling feature, and just come up with a short description of what your app is going to do, like a 3-sentence thing of what your app is going to do, as well as start coming up with features. Like, say I would like our app to do this. I would like a user to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Create like a small list of them because when Judith comes in tomorrow, we're going to hit the ground running, and she's going to be reaching out to the groups, asking what kind of features you want, and fleshing out your user stories. In addition, come up with a team name. Doesn't have to be right now, but come up with a team name, because that's what Judith is going to reference you by. Right now it's called Garden Harvest, what grows in my area, and the unofficial classroom collaborator. Come up with something a little more. Garden Harvest isn't actually that bad. But come up with something, a team name. Also, Trello. So I highly recommend using Trello as your project management. So here's an example of ones from last cohort. So must have backlog, doing, testing, done. Create a Trello board and then invite everyone on your team to it, because you're all going to be working in here and moving cards around. And so the entire team can see specifically what everyone is working on and what else has to get done. So who in the teams is going to be responsible for setting up the Trello board? And it literally doesn't have to look like this. It just create a Trello board and invite people to it. Judith is going to go cover tomorrow about like how to organize a Trello board.
I can do the Trello boards for.
Okay, awesome.
Customer.
So if you don't have the people's emails on your team, just reach out, or actually I'll just Slack out. Or yeah, just reach out to your team members and ask for their emails, so you can invite them. So who's going to create the Trello board for the other group?
I can take care of it.
Okay. All right, Dan. Thank you. So preferably have that done. Just create the Trello board and then invite your team members to it. And also invite Noah and myself and Meryl and Gus, because we'll want to see your Trello boards as well, just to see where everyone's at. All right. Oh, sweet. All right.
Should I run npm install or
No.
no? Okay.
So are you npx create React app?
Yeah, I already did.
Yeah. You don't have to npm install anything.
Okay.
However, the people who clone it down will have to npm install.
Okay, that tracks. Yeah.
So, all right. What questions do you have about the GitHub repositories, authentication? If you can't get an authentication to work, just fake it.
I don't know if anybody's used it yet, but I'm pretty sure there's a built-in GitHub. Like if you go into one of the repos, you can do like a Trello board in there and link your issues or pull requests to it or something.
Yep.
I haven't used it specifically, but it looks like it might be pretty useful.
Yeah, I've used it before. It's almost like if it's just project management, you can like automate your workflow and do a bunch of stuff, but it takes time. There is a learning curve, and I'd rather have everyone focus on actually writing code, actually building features than learning how to automate and all that stuff. But if you want to use it, you can. I used it for my final project in the cohort I went to, or in the program I went through, but you can explore it. But yeah. So yeah, this is, if you go to projects in your thing, you can create a project and then tasks and all that thing. So it's just whatever's comfortable for you. We highly recommend using Trello because it's so easy, and a lot of places still use it. What other questions do you have? I know everyone's usually when you get your group, you're always like usually, oh, or like it's generally you're like, oh my gosh, like this is what I have to do or whatever. But I can assure you, if you are like that right now, you'll get over it in a day or two, and then you'll really hit the ground running and start collaborating with your teammates to create the coolest final project of Code Platoon. Did anyone watch the last cohort's final projects presentations?
Yeah, there's some pretty cool ones in there.
Yeah, I did try to, but I was in the middle of some issues where I lost internet signal.
Yeah.
I seen the data one that they did with the
Up and Up.
Yeah, I can't remember the name,
Yeah.
but it was basically the one where they, you could find a good area to live in. I think it was probably Up and Up.
Yeah, that was this one right here that you're seeing.
And I loved it because they had so much data sets that they had to filter and clean so that they could even do anything with it.
Yeah,
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, the two students that did that, or people that did that, they were really heavy into data science, and they both had like data science backgrounds.
Oh, they had, yeah. I figured they had to have had some. They probably had. I imagine at least one of them had like a bachelor's or something.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a few of them just had an insane amount of data science in their background. Just because I've done some data science and I know how hard it can be to use. I assume did they use pandas?
I actually don't know. I don't know. You can see, I don't know, but you can see how the Trello board, what a user story is going to look like. And Judith is going to ensure you write your cards like this. If you write it any other way, when she has stand-ups with you every day, she's going to be like, what the hell's going on? Why aren't you doing it the way it should be done? So if you kind of look at it, each card it starts with as a user, as a user, as a user, as a user. If you look at it, it'll say as a user, I can be forwarded to third-party sites that can show me a place to buy, rent, narrowed down by neighborhood. And then you'll have some of this stuff in here, and you'll actually have to, this is like a template. So these are your goals. These are like tech considerations that you'll write down, acceptance criteria, which will be when testing this, what is the acceptance criteria that what it needs to meet before I can actually officially say this is a done project. So you can kind of see some of that stuff. As a user, I'm able to navigate through the site from a nav bar. What goes on in the nav bar from left to right, landing page, filter, map page. These are all just different things to consider. See, kind of all that stuff. So she's going to go through all this tomorrow. We're going to talk about what is it called? Sketching, or what she calls crazy eights or something. It's how to flush out a design really quick, rapidly, iteration. to get a kind of a designed app relatively quickly. Also, if you don't, I recommend having at least a few pieces of paper on hand tomorrow with and a pencil, because you're going to be actually doing some sketching as well. What other questions do you have? The hardest part is going to be, so right here, you've pushed this up here. I'm going to go to settings, branches, add a rule, require pull request reviews before merging. How many people do we want to approve a request? We want 2 people. Require status checks before required. All right. And then the branch name is going to be master. So, yep. So right now, if you want to make a merge or pull request into the master, you need 2 people to sign off on it, to look at your code and confirm, like, hey, yeah, that's good. Right here. I'm going to do the same thing with this one.
And that's 2 people other than yourself, so not you and one other person. It's pretty much 3, but yourself and the 2 others.
Correct. It's, yeah, you can't approve your own code. There we go. So there you go. So it's to protect the branches. It's to protect the code. And you don't have to do it now, but yeah. So does anybody have any questions? And that's kind of what today's review of about branching and merging and today's review challenge was kind of about.
If past groups run into any issues with code formatting, things like that, I mean, I guess the Python community has really gotten become pretty big fans of Black because it gets rid of, right? It just does it. You don't have to have a committee meeting, right? Black just conforms your Python code to PEP standards, and you move on, right, and focus on actually writing code. But the JavaScript side is Wild West. So
I've never had any groups like talk about code standards. Like if you want to have a 5-minute discussion, whether it's, you know, spaces or tabs, you can, but ideally I wouldn't spend too much time on it.
I just didn't know if you had seen it. People run into, because I'm used to joining an already established open source project where I just conform to whatever rules they have, and I've never really had to manage the merging. I wasn't sure if, you know, tabs versus spaces start breaking stuff with like Travis or things like that.
Yeah, it shouldn't. But no, I've never had experience, or I haven't seen anybody's groups experience any substantial conflicts with regards to tabs versus spaces or just like coding standards.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So just a quick refresher. If you can't get authentication to work, just fake it. It's not actually faking it. You are creating authentication. It just doesn't utilize a token. Come up with a short description of your app and start talking about what features you would like. Judith is going to want a list of features that you and your team have kind of talked about as what would be nice to have, or just yeah, essentially just features of your project. Setting up GitHub, it's pretty much all set up. And then, so hopefully once tomorrow starts and Friday starts, or essentially once the weekend starts, you all can hit the ground running, not having to worry about setting up a new repository and how to get started. And we can go through this again tomorrow and Friday as well. But yep. What questions do you have? The hardest part initially is being able to collaborate as a team and who's working on what and what that looks like. Speaking of that, I've been asked this multiple times in the past by other cohorts as like, if someone's working on a front end component and needs to interact with the back end, but that person isn't working on the back end, how does that work? Like, how do they talk, or how does that kind of development work? So for example, say I need to create a login page, or I need to create a component that fetches to my Django backend, and it needs to get a list of posts. But I'm only working on the front end, and Noah is working on the back end. So Noah and I would get together real quick and be like, hey, what kind of data, what does the data structure look like that you're sending me from the back end to the front end? And then she'll be like, oh, it's an object. It's got a name, a post, it's got a date, and it's got a description. So it's an object with keys of name, post, date, description. Like, okay, cool, I can work with that. So in your component, so in the front end component that I'm going to be building, I'm going to expect like a property to come in from the back end to be an object. So I can just create some dummy data in my component of an object with name, post, create a date, description, and I can work with that data in my component, and I can push my component. Once I'm done with it, I can push it, make a pull request. Noah can do the same. And then when we combine them together, if the data that she's sending me is correct, which is an object that has name, post, description, date, it should match up with my component. So when that comes together, there shouldn't be any merge conflicts. And when I run my app, it should work as expected. If it doesn't, Noah and I can go in there, debug it, see what's actually wrong, and then one of us can make changes, or both of us can make a little bit of changes so they actually line up, like the data flow matches one another, and then we can push a fix to that and make a pull request for that fix. So if you want to, yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, but I've been asked that question in the past. And that's how it actually happens in the real world. That's what I used to do with my CTO in my last company. All right. I see people are throwing down features already. That's great in the Slack. With that, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Noah, Meryl, or Gus. Otherwise, I'd like you, both of your teams to convene with one another, so you can just make a Slack call, talk about the project, come up with a team name, a short description, and some features. You can talk about those features and flush out some ideas. Don't get really too into the weeds. Don't start whiteboarding, or don't start wireframing details right now. We'll get to that tomorrow and Friday. All right. And I made breakout rooms earlier because Judith is going to be using breakout rooms to talk with teams individually. Does anybody have any questions?
How do we access those?
We create them and we force you into them, kind of thing. We create them and then I don't know what happens on your end, but it'll say like, hey, join a breakout room.
Okay, because I got the invitation earlier. We were just still doing the Git pairing.
Yeah, I was just messing around with it. I posted in the Slack channel that I was just kind of messing around, making sure everything was working. So yeah, you'll get a notification to ask to join a breakout room. when that happens. All right. What other questions?
Can I start a discussion about authentication?